the way, we've got the West Point grad who was arrested for photographing police here in Austin. It's a big story now a national story, because it looks like they set him up. He's going to be in studio with us. He's pretty stressed out from all the attention he's given. He's going to be on the nightly news tonight. We've got some other guests as well. Paul Watson will do the news portion. I'm going to do the interviews, the two interviews this evening. The comedian and social commentary guy, Lionel, will also be on with us via Skype. But let's go back to Charlotte Esby. This is a short segment, long segment coming up. So, Charlotte, you start discovering all of this, and then now years later are able to tie it into Skull and Bones. But you were saying you pulled off the shelf at the Department of Education this book that was talking about what works.
What works? Well, what works is animal psychology. And that's just what I told you. With your dog, you can train your dog. It's very, very simple. All of you must understand that that is the computer technology. When your child is the computer, which is, no more books. Books are down the tubes. All the history of this is in my book, which is the abbreviated version, but it's a fantastic version. Nothing chronological has been taken out. And this is the history of what happened. But it's getting into the computer. When the top people, like at YCAT, World Institute for Computer Assisted Teaching, Dustin Houston said this, folks, and parents, listen. He knew what was coming. This was 20 years ago. He said, won't it be wonderful when the student in the most remote part of the country can have the equivalent of 5 of the world's greatest psychologists on the computer, and nobody will be able to get between the student and the software, the computer. So it's just very, very dangerous. And even the top educators who are involved in computer technology, ones that I got fired for leaking a document by one of these educators. It was one of his major grants, Better Education Skills Through Technology. This fellow, Donald Ely, he admitted in his internal papers that if you don't agree as a computer tech guy or professor, if you don't agree with the message, you do not put it on that software. You have to have a conscience because it is so powerful. Now, folks, this is what's going in now. No more books. Now, what we're going to say...
Well, I mean, it allows total centralization.
This is what Skull and Bones brought back into the United States from Wilhelm Wundt, who is directly connected with the Illuminati. This is what they brought back to this G. Stanley Hall into the United States. They stacked all of the universities, Columbia, Chicago, etc., with people like Dewey, Thorndike, et al., who believe man is nothing but an animal to be trained. Now, C.S. Lewis was the one who said, when you stop educating and you start training, which is what they're doing right now for the planned economy, global, when you stop educating and you start training, civilization dies. Now, that's C.S. Lewis, all right? Now, my little book, the abbreviated version, is fantastic. All the sections that have been taken out, the big chunks, the appendices, the index, etc., are available free at my website. It's a free download, the old book, the big baby. So anybody who wants to check on what may have been removed, there are 3 little dark D's whenever something's removed, they just go on the internet. But it's a very user-friendly, beautiful book. I find myself, my son said to me, Mom, I've never seen you reading your book as much as you're reading it now. Well, I am, because it's so nice and small and handy, and I just delight in my own book. It was always very, very big, and we had people who loved it, obviously, or it wouldn't be out of print and selling for $1,000 in some places, you know, ridiculous, $200, $400, $600 at Amazon. It's the old book, right? So the people who've got old copies or whatever. But it was always large and rather cumbersome. So now this is a beautiful version that you can give to your friends.
It is. Charlotte, stay there. Let's come back. We got to go to break. Let's tie in the Illuminati to Skull and Bones to education. Yesterday, I interviewed an investigative journalist breaking down government documents where over 40 known cancer viruses were added to the polio vaccines. It's still done. I have other top scientists and doctors like Russell Blaylock on, and the only conclusion they can come to is that it's being done by design. the aspartame, the MSG, the additives. And then lo and behold, we have all these UN and Club of Rome documents in Rockefeller Foundation where they're adding the chemicals into the food, the water, the additives, the printer ink. And so Charlotte Iserby's hitting it from another angle, breaking down skull and bones, and where the elite got this philosophy to dumb people down. Now, they put this fog of chemicals and things out there, but then to make us animals and to tell us we're animals that don't have free will, while they play the part of God. These Illuminati believe they are man, we are the profane animal. But to make us the animal, they bombard us with this and then try to train us, not educate us. And that's programming versus learning the mysteries of the world, learning to enjoy knowledge and systems. They want people to be very, very one-dimensional. Now, Charlotte Iserby is not only one of the most famous whistleblowers, and I'm building her up. You know, she'll talk herself down, but I mean, she was the head of policy, Department of Education, that blew the whistle, brought the documents out, got basically fired over it, and her book documents that, the deliberate dumbing down of America. But then she's also the lady that helped give Anthony Sutton the material that exposed Skull and Bones. But in decades later, continuing to research, that was hiding under her nose as well, that it was Skull and Bones that actually set the modern policy for all of this. Now you were getting into the Illuminati connections. Charlotte, go ahead.
Well, this is fascinating. I mean, things that happened in my life are unbelievable. You're right. For about 30 years, I did all the research on B.F. Skinner and Pavlov and how these methods, like the reading method, direct instruction, that the conservatives managed to get across the country now because it's necessary for workforce training. Of course, they got into reading first, experimenting on the minorities with it, etc. But I was studying this stuff, and I knew it makes children sick. I have a friend, a great teacher in Arizona, Ann Herzer, who educated me, and I have all the documents from doctors about how this operant conditioning, these programs make children sick. And, anyway, so here I'm looking at all this. I have all the major documents. It takes me quite a long time. I understand that, but I had no idea that the order at Yale that my father and grandfather belonged to, it was the order that actually brought this method back from Germany. And it's very interesting. You see, the Germans are extremely involved in this. They were, and perhaps still are. I mean, in the fluoride thing and all. Dennis Cuddy's just written a wonderful new book, which my son is reading, and which deals with how all of this stuff is the Germans, it's Nazi stuff too. So it's not just the communists, it's the Nazis, the fascists, the socialists. I always say America's not an ism country, but we are really deep in the mess right now with the isms. But anyway, going back to the order, so little Charlotte, the one that gets fired from the department for leaking these documents, I knew how bad the Department of Education was. It's total Marxist factory, right? All of a sudden, I find out most of this, I found out from Anthony Sutton, who had done the research. He's the one who found out about the connection with Wilhelm Wundt with the Illuminati. Wilhelm Wundt's grandfather was a member of the Illuminati. Well, I remember I sent Tony Sutton, there were some documents in German that I never saw again, but I sent them to Sutton. I didn't know what they were, but Sutton got them, and I don't know whether I lost them when he returned them. But anyway, I am quite truly convinced that, let's look at it this way, folks. There is nothing more important than the loss of free will. We have a soul and a conscience. What was brought back from Germany, operant conditioning, Pavlov studied under Wundt, this is the method to destroy the human individual made in the image of God, to destroy his conscience. You must remember this. You probably think I'm exaggerating. I'm not. This is what we're looking at. This is more important than anything being talked about in the news today. The loss of the conscience. I've written a lot on this. It's on the internet. You can find my articles. This is what happened when the order at Yale decided to get their guys, educated in Germany, and many of the, actually, it was G. Stanley Hall was the first one, and he admits to being being half a Marxist himself, back in the mid-1800s, mind you. He admitted to that. So he brings it back. It's picked up by Dewey and Thorndike, etc., and the method goes into the teachers' colleges, and our teachers are trained to train our students. Train, not educate. Of course, this didn't happen until 1965. Now, the results of this, one could see this morning. I opened up the computer, and I was Fox News, interesting enough, which won't cover my book, of course. But they did cover, like, oh, my goodness me, how can this be possible? This Jack Chambers, an economic professor at a college, I didn't get it all written down, he asked his students what the American dream means to them. This is in college. And he asked specifically, what do you want the government, what do you think the government should do? Well, 10%, good for them, said, leave me alone. 80% said that the government should take care of their vacations, make sure they get a good job, give them health care, give them housing, and that the wealthy should be taxed more. Now, there was one individual who said, can you believe this one? As human beings, we are not responsible for our actions. We need the government to keep us in line, sort of. Now, that's not a direct quote. I just sort of remember that. But first of all, this individual who says we need the government to keep us in line and we're not responsible for our actions, that student evidently was very carefully trained in Darwin. There were animals. So they made a mistake. They still think they're human beings, but they're not.
Well, you're right.
The people have been conditioned and trained like animals all the way through from the time that G. Stanley Hall went over to Germany for the order and came back, retrained, and now what we're looking at is the computer technology is nothing but Pavlovian.
And that allows total centralization of the message, but expanding on that, and we see a global curriculum being standardized. I've seen the studies that there are now more sociopaths than there used to be, and even more psychopaths, and that the system is creating artificial sociopaths. Normally their numbers were much lower, but they can also have it where they flip on a switch that makes you a sociopath, but then can flip it back off when they want you to feel. So it's total programming. It's like they're biological androids, and it's so scientifically done. How is their plan going along for them from your deep research of this from every angle?
Well, I'm afraid they're highly successful. And the reason for this, Alex, is another thing that has always bewildered us. Why is it that, for instance, when I wrote my book in 1985, the little 39-pager, Back to Basics Reform, that exposed all of this Skinner stuff and said it was for a world government which would arrive, in the 21st century, all of that book was boycotted across the board by the conservative movement. If that book had been listened to in 1985, we might not have this Skinnerian opera conditioning on the computers, et cetera, right now. But they boycotted. Now wait a minute, isn't that interesting? The conservatives. This is under Ronald Reagan, okay? And so anyway, that happened, and then I wrote my big book because I figured maybe this will go. Well, that was boycotted by them too. They've done nothing to get the big book. They do not want this information. Now, I'm sure the Democrats are involved in it as well, and they've paid for the funding, and they love the Department of Education, blah, blah, blah. But I have to say that the school to work agenda, which requires school choice is the most devastatingly bad thing that ever happened to this country because it's not really school choice whatsoever. It's federally funded charter schools that don't have elected officials running them because the corporations are going to run those charter schools to train for the workforce with the Skinnerian opera conditioning on the computer. Now, this is the conservatives supporting this because conservatives are notable for wanting to make money, right? I mean, we know that there's nothing wrong with making money. But when you decide that you're going to turn your children over to be nothing but slaves in this planned economy, to be moved around the world, and a lot of these quotes from my book from educators, they're going to be moved around the world wherever they need them, using nothing but computer technology, opera conditioning, etc., to train them lifelong, all of this.
Yeah, but Charlotte, there's also all these globalist groups now pushing the solution to the New World Order is mega computers that make all the decisions for us, but really those computers are programmed by the globalists themselves. It's a new form of tyranny.
Yes, it is. And Alex, what we have to understand is that we've lost the. I hate to say this, and maybe it's not completely true, but I believe we have lost the Christian community. Because the Christian community, the evangelicals, we always depended on them to support us in trying to get rid of the